small rebel force has penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times.
Star Wars #1!
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
I tell you, what a great week to be a Star Wars fan. I mean, it's always a great time to be a Star Wars fan, but this week in particular, coming off of a fantastic episode of Ahsoka, there seems to be a lot of excitement about it, even across channels that are maybe haven't been quite so friendly with the series. I mean, we've had our own complaints about the series up to this point. We got to tell it like it is. Be honest with you all. It's not being negative. It's just making observations and calling it as we see it. Recognizing, of course, that there's always room for interpretation and a lot of different opinions, but there seems to be a unity among Star Wars fans this week that this was a fantastic episode. And if you didn't join us this week for the after show, the Ahsoka After Show, looking at Part 5 Shadow Warrior, please do. It was a great time. One of the biggest crowds we've had for our live shows, and it's all available for you on demand on our YouTube channel. Plus, it's also available as a audio podcast. So if you're wanting to commute or you're out mowing the lawn or unloading the dishwasher, I find I find doing the mundane tasks and chores around the house so much more enjoyable with a good podcast playing. It makes you not dread some of that monotonous stuff. So if we can be a way to distract yourself from that stuff, so be it. But it was a great episode, great discussion, and there's more. There's more to talk about when it comes to Ahsoka, particularly that episode. So we're going to be going through some of the lost super chats, the super chats we didn't get to, and just some more observations. I'm sure the voicemail this week it's bound to be about Ahsoka Part 5. And, of course, with me here, if you're new to the program, and we hope you are, whenever we do these after shows, we always get new listeners that discover the program. My name is Jason, and with me, as always, my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Star Wars fans. Yeah, still in the wake of what an incredible episode of Ahsoka, one I will definitely watch 500 times. And it's been a lot of fun to watch some of the conversation online in the wake of this episode. Look at all of the diverse opinions and analysis of what went down, with the comfort of knowing anything anyone has to say about it is correct. It's not wrong, or maybe everyone's wrong, but I'm seeing a lot of diverse opinions, and that's what I think great Star Wars does, is it breeds amazing conversation and debate. Did Hera actually hear the sabers clashing? Was that legitimately the Force spirit of Anakin? Or was it just a vision as Ahsoka was battling her demons? These are all things we're going to be talking about forever, and I hope never get defined as far as these episodes go. I like being able to hear everyone else's certain point of view. And I love quoting that line when I'm talking about Star Wars. There's something very meta about it because it comes from Star Wars, but it also defines my personal approach to Star Wars, where anything and everything is open to interpretation. And sometimes we need a solid episode like Ahsoka Part 5 to plant our feet back on the ground as a collective fan base and engage in these types of debates and conversation. So I'm really, really on a high right now, if you can't tell. I'm riding a wave, surf is up, and I'm hanging 10, baby.
Oh, you got to, if you haven't watched the video, you got to check it out. Mac practically rips his clothes off at the beginning of the episode. He was so excited.
It was exciting. It was very exciting. And I emerged from that after show as Jimmy Mack the White. So, maybe we'll actually see that next week on the after show. But who knows?
Well, as promised, we do want to get these super chats. These are leftover super chats. When I say leftover, I just mean they were ones that we didn't get to. And I know that there's a lot of YouTubers out there that what they do is they do a live stream, and it's just the super chats and the chats just sort of dictate the flow of the conversation. And that's not necessarily what we do. It enhances the conversation. Sometimes we don't get to all of them, but I've got them right here. I printed them out so that we could get to them because you guys spend your hard-earned money on these, and so we want to make sure that you get your due. So, Jim, without further ado, here's Rick Lee, super chat from last night, saying, I've been hearing they should retcon the sequels and base them on these episodes. You know, there were rumors about Filoni, this goes back a couple years ago, even, that Filoni was going to use the world between worlds and the Filoni verse and the Favreau verse as a way to literally retcon the sequel trilogy. I don't see that happening. I also don't think it's really necessary. I have my faults with the films, no doubt about it, but they exist, and they are Star Wars 7, 8, and 9. They do involve the legacy characters and those actors that we love so much. So I would much prefer Dave do for those films what he did with the prequels, which is do something like the Clone Wars. And not just Dave, that was George Lucas that did the Clone Wars. But Dave was obviously a major figure in that. I would much rather him do the same with the sequel trilogy, give us more context, give us more of a lead-in so that those films resonate and hit differently. And he did that with the prequels, and I think he can do it with the sequels without retconning them.
Yes. Back to fill-in-the-blank storytelling. But in this situation, he possibly can at least expand on the mythology that was thrown at us in the sequel trilogy and try to apply some story beats earlier in the Star Wars timeline that will provide more resonance to the story beats as they get thrown at us in the sequel trilogy. It needs that foundation. And Filoni is a guy who can do it, but I don't think that's his priority. I think his priority right now is completing the mission he set out on over 15 years ago when he first developed the character of Ahsoka with George Lucas. That's what I think Dave is mostly concerned with. I don't know if the sequel trilogy is as present on his radar as some people like to believe. I think Dave's a live-in-the-moment kind of guy, judging from my
I think people are projecting some of their own hopes and wishes onto Dave.
Of course.
Yeah.
But I don't ever see the sequel trilogy being rebooted, primarily for the fact that The Force Awakens had a massive cultural impact and still stands up there on the list of all-time box office super champs. It was, like I said, the ripples felt throughout pop culture. I mean, my mom went to go see it with her friends, dragging oxygen tanks, going for the senior citizen screening. So, I mean, that's what I'm talking about. And I don't think that should be snubbed in any way, shape, or form. That was a big moment for Hollywood history. The return of Star Wars. Regardless of what you feel about it now, most of us were in the moment, living it up. Big time.
Absolutely we were. And we should have been. You know, there's time, as we always say, there's time to digest these things, and sometimes they give us indigestion afterwards, but there's time to place them into context and break them down, but enjoy them in the moment. Enjoy them in the moment for what they are and what they offer. Here is Rezekai. This is in response to some of the comments, Mac, you were making last night. Don't beat yourself up about your previous opinions of earlier episodes, Jimmy Mac. Some of the earlier episodes did hella drag on in parts.
Oh, yeah.
So...
Well, I don't do that. I really don't. I think a lot of my criticisms still in the wake of episode 5 are very valid about the first 4 episodes.
Yeah.
However, I have more, there's been revelation. Finally, the premise for the series has been established in a real way. And I think that means you have to go back and look at the first 4 episodes in almost a different light. So the conversation that I'm having last night, where I'm not regretting my reviews. Those are moments in time, that's what I was feeling in the moment. But of course it evolves. Of course I realized when I was making those comments that I should have a sense of optimism just because we've only had a partial bit of the story. And I really like to evaluate the whole thing at the end. And I find that sometimes these things hit the landing for me, and sometimes they don't, despite them being a good experience for me along the way. The Kenobi show, for example. That's when I was telling everybody, #JustEnjoyStarWars. And I think that's because I'm so precious about the characters that were presented to us in that show. How precious am I about Hera? How precious am I about Sabine? And even Ahsoka, too. I love Ahsoka. Everyone knows I love Ahsoka, but I don't love Ahsoka like I love the original trilogy characters. And I don't even know if Ahsoka matches up there with some of the prequel characters I'm pretty fond of when I think about who I want to spend time with in the Star Wars universe. But I do think
All right, you can only save one. You save Qui-Gon Jinn or you save Ahsoka Tano. Jimmy Mack, who do you save?
Ahsoka. Because Ahsoka is establishing the future of Star Wars right now. She's the perfect character for 2023, I think.
Okay.
To carry Star Wars into the future. Qui-Gon had his film, and that was it. I've never wanted a resurrection of Qui-Gon Jinn. I'll just say.
Well, you didn't waver at all on that. I mean, you didn't even have to think about
because
it. Because
his character serves such a purpose. And why do I have to kill him when Darth Maul gets the blood on his hands? Me and Ahsoka will just skip off into the sunset, no problem.
This is one of the best handles I think I've ever seen. Anakin's thighs chimed in with the super chat. RFR number 1. You guys just deserve this. Love you guys. What a time to be a fan. I was without words for the first time since the Clone Wars season 7. So throwing this episode up there with the finale of the Clone Wars.
Yeah, and I think so. I laid out my top 5 list of Disney Star Wars on the after show. And I did so without any thought or preparation. It just flowed out of me. So let me see if I remember what I said. I mean, it's what I feel, so I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to mimic exactly what I said last night. But I think Mandalorian season 1 and 2. I think Rogue One. I think this episode. No, I was more specific. I said that the Mandalorian season 2 finale, this episode, part 5 of Ahsoka, Rogue One, the Siege of Mandalore arc that wrapped up season 7 of Clone Wars, and what was number 5? I don't remember what number 5 was. I thought I said 5.
It was number 1.
Number 1
I thought it was
is
Andor,
Andor No Way Out.
No Way Out.
No Way Out's on my list. Thank you for reminding me.
Yes.
Like I said, I was in the moment, but yes, definitely that episode is outstanding. So that's where I think our top 5 is right now as we record this mid-September 2023.
Mike Latoris says arguably the best Star Wars. Yeah, I know.
Let's just call him Mike.
He just mowed me. Bart Simpson mowed me.
You didn't.
Is there a Mike Latoris here? Oh, God, I didn't even see it. What a simp I am. Okay. Mike, with a super chat, says arguably the best Star Wars since Revenge of the Sith. Okay.
Arguably.
Media. What's arguably?
Arguably.
Media Rav says, we assume people don't know the backstory. They might not understand the plot, but many will seek out answers. Google Ezra, Google Space Whales, Thrawn, Jason, etc.
Yeah, so much homework. Why are you making
it really is.
Jump through all
now
these
you're giving me.
I mean, this is a visual medium telling a visual story with live action actors and realistic special effects. So if that's not good enough for you, go Google. I don't know. That seems like a step backward.
I agree. Brad from Chicago says, hey guys, theory, Anakin has assumed Brad was not alone in this. Theory, Anakin has assumed the role of the father of Mortis in the world between worlds, seen in his effortless switches between light and dark side in the episode.
I think the father is just an archetype, and it's just the Force conveying a message. I don't think there's actually like a revolving door of, well, who's this year's father? You know, I mean,
right.
How do you even determine a term in that case? You know, you have these guys in there forever. Then what gets done? Nothing.
I was listening back to the show, and you made a comment about the world between worlds having appeared throughout Star Wars without us knowing that it was the world between worlds. They didn't telegraph it with the look and everything. And upon hearing it, I was like, wow, okay, that's very cool. And Isla Dazarn says this was the Dagobah cave for Ahsoka this episode. She chose the light, and you'd thrown out, hey, maybe the Dagobah cave of evil happens in the world between worlds.
Sure enough. I also think
maybe
Rey's Forceback happens in the world between worlds. I believe that Han Solo visiting Kylo Ren on the Death Star ruins is something that's occurring in the world between worlds. So there are other examples. You know, Ezra in the Temple was one I used. I used that one because Dave Filoni, I heard him say.
Yeah, he said.
That Ezra is within the world between worlds at that moment. So it's a really interesting concept that I think just gives us a visual representation of the Force at work, which may not have been possible in the past with Jedi standing around sensing things and... You know, like for example, in Attack of the Clones, when Yoda is in his quarters and he's meditating.
Anakin, no!
I think Yoda is tripping out in the world between worlds at that moment. I think Yoda, when he keeps his eye on Luke from afar, is accessing the world between worlds to do it. I mean, it's easy to say, well, he's just looking through the Force and stuff, but the world between worlds gives us this like visual representation of what's going down. I, in the past, have referred to it as a storytelling crutch or even a shortcut, but upon analysis and a new experience in the world between worlds, thanks to Ahsoka Part 5, I'm really coming to different conclusions about what it is, how it can be used, and why it exists.
I think as long as it doesn't change history,
right?
I think then it is not a crutch. It's not a convenient device.
If it's used for a retcon sort of thing, where I don't know, they pull Rey out of the portal and they throw in Jackson or something. I don't know what people want. But that would be interesting, you know, to see the sequel trilogy unfold from Jackson's perspective. Is that what you want? Or maybe Kitster. Maybe adult Kitster can be called upon. Or maybe a young Kitster can be pulled through the portal and you could drop him into the X-Wing and he can blow up the Death Star in the original Star Wars A New Hope. I mean, this is a slippery slope we're on, and I prefer the way that Filoni and the crew have been using the world between worlds up to this point, especially now that I think I have a more clear-headed analysis of what it is.
Chris 1529 says, I enjoyed the first half of the episode. I just can't get into the Force whales. It doesn't feel Star Warsy to me, more like Avatar, and I hate Avatar. So, all right, Chris, I've never seen Avatar. I still have escaped it. But as far as the whales, I get what you're saying. It's different. It's different. I think that, you know, having sat here in this chair and talked about space whales for, you know, so many times and for so long, it just feels like Star Wars to me. But I can understand if this is your first exposure to the whales, you might be like, what the hell? These are whales? I've never seen whales in Star Wars before. But if you've been following along, you know, like we have, it doesn't feel so weird. So stick around long enough and it won't feel weird.
Maybe I can help him out a little bit. Maybe it doesn't seem so weird when you really start thinking about the history of Star Wars. You say it doesn't feel Star Wars, but keep in mind, we've seen giant creatures in space before. The space slug from Empire Strikes Back, for example. Is he not Star Wars? Or it? I shouldn't be applying, it, not Star Wars. But, so I think there has been a precedent set as far as having giant creatures floating through space, traveling through space somehow. Yes, the space slug plants himself inside of an asteroid and burrows down in there. But the space whales, they're free. They're floating in packs and riding the hyperspace lanes like Evel Knievel on a motorcycle back in 1975. So that's I dig it. I was apprehensive about the Purgles when they were introduced in Rebels Season 2. I thought it was getting silly and cartoony. But now we have live action representation of these creatures. So maybe, just to understand a little bit more about them, go back and check out that Rebels episode from Season 2. I don't recall what the actual name of it is, but it should be easy enough to seek out. I gave you the season. That I know. I know it was Season 2.
It's a quick Google search, just like our friend said. It was just so easy to do.
Yeah.
Media Ravs. It's just Google search it. Last super chat here from Daniel Rodriguez about the Purgale. The Purgale sequence was stunning. Seeing hope wash over Ahsoka was beautiful. It was beautiful. Seeing her, I think, more akin to what we're used to, a hopeful, an optimistic, a compassionate, a smiling Ahsoka. It was great. It was great. Yeah, and worth the wait.
I don't need Ahsoka grinning ear to ear all the time. I mean, the stakes are high in some of these situations she finds herself in. I don't need her laughing and giggling and bopping her way through the galaxy. I want her to have an edge, and I want to always be taking her seriously. There's no doubt about that. But in the first 4 episodes prior, it's not a smile. It was just a general sense of there was a lack of warmth. The character was just cold as ice, and that's a little too much. That's just too much, but it was going somewhere. There was a purpose to it to provide the transition from the Ahsoka we meet at the beginning of the episode, and then she goes through her transformation and
AHSOKA, I called her.
From Ahsoka to a Smileka. That's who she is. That's the transition right there. But yes, I do like having that warmth. But more importantly, part of my frustrations also weren't with the Ahsoka characterization so much is the fact that I felt there was a restrictor plate on Rosario Dawson's acting carburetor, slowing her down. And then she also emerged. Rosario Dawson and her acting chops emerged in part 5. And I was really happy to see it because I've seen Rosario act in a bunch of things over the years. And I've always been quite impressed with her acting skills and also just like very fond of seeing her on screen. I like her presence. And now the presence is being felt. Now that we're past all of these trials she had to go through. I mean, it was trying, believe me. She wasn't the only one going through trials, my friend. We as an audience, I felt like was too. And also, it doesn't do anything to justify the crowd who was saying, well, people change when they get older. People get changed. It's like I'm looking at the ages of some of these people writing. It's like age 18, age 23. It's like talk to me when you get some experience under your belt, and you'll find yourself. Maybe you do change, but I think after a while you always revert into the person you truly are. Your own personality cannot be ever thrown away. It always comes back. It always reveals itself. Nature. It comes to the surface always. Yeah.
And especially when you back someone into a corner, that's when you know who they really are.
Yeah.
Let's check into some voicemail. Why not?
Yes.
You must contact me.
Play back the entire message.
What message?
Message, Arthur, the message.
The Emperor commands you to make contact with him. It's a trick. Send no reply.
Hey, Jason. Hey, Jimmy. It's Nick out here in Atlanta. Man, awesome episode 5, or part 5, I guess, of Ahsoka. Just had 2 thoughts on the flashbacks of young Ahsoka and Anakin. Number 1, the live action really makes it more almost just terrifying that the Jedi would put essentially children to battle with the Padawans. In the animation, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around it, but sitting there with live action Ahsoka and how young she was, it really just shows kind of how messed up it was that they put these children as soldiers out to battle. The other thought, too, kind of tying into that, was this really kind of shows maybe why Barriss Offee was so crazy and why she went so off the rails towards the end of season 5 of Clone Wars. You know, I'm sure years of PTSD of being a child soldier had some huge impact on her mental psyche. So just really cool. Really showed a different perspective of the Clone Wars and opened my eyes to kind of how messed up it was that the Jedi would allow the children to go to battle as their soldiers. So want to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Keep up the great work. Love the show. Thanks.
Hey, man, thank you very much for the voicemail. Yeah, you know, Jim, there's things that you can kind of get away with in animation. Animation is somewhat forgiving. Characters end up sort of ageless, timeless. I think of legacy characters like the Flintstones and the Simpsons, and, you know, they never age, they never get older. But when you start to cast someone in that role, it's a living, breathing human being, then all of a sudden, wow, you know, you get a sense of age, and with age comes a certain sense of finiteness. And so seeing that young actress, Greenblatt, I believe is her name.
Yeah, Ariana Greenblatt.
Ariana Greenblatt.
I am president of her fan club. In just
Jimmy
one
Mack
day,
starting the first chapter.
In just one day, I am president. It was a bloody coup, but I am El Presidente of the fan club.
She was fantastic in the show. So yeah, you know, it's not unusual. I think that one thing we know as part of the Star Wars mythos is that the Clone Wars, and it was by design from Palpatine, the Clone Wars overextended the Jedi, not just in sheer numbers, but their mental bandwidth, their force bandwidth, all of it overextended them. So of course they had to start to, I'm assuming, bring up perhaps prematurely or faster than normal the younger Padawans. It makes sense. They had to move up in the ranks probably a little quicker than they normally would have when they were just keepers of the peace. So yeah, it's a sobering look at this particular chapter in Jedi history. And then our caller also mentions, you know, Barriss Offee. Is it now more understandable how she cracked up under the pressure? And absolutely, this gives us a whole new perspective in Barriss Offee and that breakdown essentially that she has.
Yeah, it's so easy to take these characters for granted. A character like Ahsoka, child, on a battlefield. Barriss Offee, caught up in all of the political intrigue and warfare of the era. Yeah, obviously. I mean, we see Ahsoka go through so much in such a brief period of time during those young Ahsoka flashbacks in part 5 of Ahsoka. I mean, you see her as she confronts Anakin displaying all of these different emotions with like every line and every cut of the camera. You were getting a different Ahsoka. You were getting the compassionate Ahsoka. You were getting the Ahsoka mired in guilt. You were getting the confused Ahsoka, the conflicted Ahsoka, the frustrated Ahsoka, and an Ahsoka that just, you know, locked in trepidation all the time because the role that she's serving is so unnatural for Jedi. And Palpatine knew that. Palpatine was always working the Force in unnatural ways. That was his whole thing. And so he, as a result, would toss people into unnatural situations that they couldn't comprehend or deal with. And I see it with such clarity now after this episode of Ahsoka. And it's just something I never considered because, you know, I mean, the whole tone and purpose of the animated series, while it did get very deep and mature for an animated series on Cartoon Network, it still provided us with, all the pew-pews and thrills that Star Wars is been, was originally conceived to do, to be the space.
And the Roger Rogers.
And a bunch of Roger Rogers. I mean, more Roger Rogers than can last a fan several lifetimes. We've been Roger to hell and back. But so, I mean, the humanity of Ahsoka is on display in this series with these flashbacks specifically. Mm-hmm. And through all of those moments, Ahsoka, she appears, she goes, this is the Clone Wars. So she already has she's fully aware. She knows everything that's going on. So when we see her confront Anakin, is that a repeat of history? Is that how young Ahsoka acted toward Anakin? Or is this older Ahsoka reliving her youth with a different perspective now that she's been through so much via experience? Different perspectives, different ways to look at this show.
That is a really interesting question.
That's why I think there's no right or wrong. I think that this episode can be analyzed by us fans for a really long time. And I wouldn't be jumping down anyone else's throat telling them you're right and they're wrong, because this is complex and deserves our full analyzation.
I had not considered until this moment that the Ahsoka that we see, the young Ahsoka, is essentially omnipotent in the sense that she's physically the young incarnation of the character, but mentally she knows everything that the Ahsoka we know at this time knows. So yes, so is she reliving exactly as it happened, or is she able to bring about a new reaction in the moment, in the situation?
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
She's bringing her.
Did she really go over and hold the hand of that clone trooper in that actual moment, in that period of time, or is that something the more mature Ahsoka did because she had another moment to have with that dying clone trooper? We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've said.
Yeah.
Different points of view.
Certain point of view. And it could be the older Ahsoka. I simply say that because her first words are like, this is the Clone Wars. This is our first battle together. She says something like that. So she's coming at it from a future perspective. And the young Ahsoka is the avatar for Rosario Dawson's Ahsoka, with all the knowledge and experience she's already had, but she still has to relive it. It's the movie Big. I think people were bringing that up in the chat last night.
Yeah, right.
How would you act if you suddenly woke up and you were 14 again, but you had the knowledge, experience, and lifetime of
what you didn't
your
know
legitimate
then,
self? I mean, yikes! There'd be a lot of things going on there that nobody could explain.
I'd probably do a lot of things that Tom Hanks character did.
Oh yeah, and then some, and then some.
This is Carrie Fisher.
Hey, Jake Lloyd here.
Hello, this is Warwick Davis, and you're listening to Rebel Force Radio.
Now this is podcasting.
This is Anthony Daniels, and they asked me to throw in an ad-lib, but they didn't throw in any money, so I'm not going to throw in anything else. Goodbye.
Hey, it's James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I must tell you, the source for the Force is Rebel Force Radio, your source for the Force.
Hey, it's Mark Hamill, that Skywalker guy from those space movies.
Rebel Force Radio. What an unfortunate moniker.
Force yourself to listen.
All right, we do have some news headlines we need to get to. What do you say? You want to jump to news?
I think so.
Let's do it.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
Ooh, I have good news. Yes. We got news. We got news, all right. First story this week, Dave Filoni talking about changing Ahsoka's appearance after the debut she had in The Mandalorian. So this goes back to Star Wars Celebration. I have not seen this clip before, but Dave went on record with Entertainment Tonight. Good thing we have these things in the can because guys like Dave are not out there making the rounds. And what a shame. I mean, thankfully, you got outlets like EW that went in there and they really talked to the stars and the creatives of Ahsoka in advance of all of this. But it's just kind of a shame that you can't turn on Jimmy Fallon and see Rosario Dawson on there talking about Ahsoka. It's kind of a bummer,
It sure
Miss
is.
that.
It sure is. But, the price you pay for progress.
So let's hear what Dave Filoni has to say about Ahsoka and her look.
It's the most significant leap in Leku that's happened maybe in Star Wars. Yeah, we had a lot of consideration the first time we did it about the length and how would that affect things, and especially like swinging lightsabers and stunts, and how do we do that? It's something that I like to think that as we've gone on, if you look at Clone Wars even, we improved and improved and improved what we did. I don't think you ever sit there and say like, oh, we did that and that was great. How do you improve something? And, I talked to the team at Legacy and we all agreed we thought we could do better. We understood the want to make things better. We like to make things look better and more true to what everybody pictures us to be. They came up with an incredible design. And when I saw it applied, I was like, this makes so much sense and it looks awesome. It's lighter for them. It's flexible in a great way. It looks good when they move, when they bend, when they're just at rest. So they're actually hollow, but sturdy and flexible.
I got to tell you, I didn't even really notice that her Leku had changed from Mando. So there were some complaints. I do remember, of course, we're Star Wars fans. We're full of complaints. We're passionate. And there were some people that didn't dig Rosario's look. They thought it looked fake. They thought it looked a little too, what would they say? Cosplay-ish.
Like
I think that was it.
That's
cosplay.
That's become the new insult. When you think something doesn't look up to par in one of these Star Wars shows, you say, oh, that looks like cosplay.
Right.
And I've heard the Hera character get a lot of that. But I personally don't see it myself. I think if that's cosplay, that's a pretty damn good cosplay going on there. So, award-winning. And the Leku, there were restrictions on what they could do with it to make the physical stuff happen. I think it's a struggle, actually, for Rosario or any stunt person to be wearing that stuff and have to do physical stuff. So it was a struggle for them to find what can work to balance the stunts and everything. And I think they found a real good look this time around. And they know it, too. They know it. And I'll tell you why they know it. Is because we got that shot of what people are saying. It's bald Ahsoka. She's not wearing her headdress when she awakens on the cot after the World Between Worlds underwater fiasco. And, the forehead is about as nude as it can get for a Togrutan. And people are talking. But to me, that is a display of confidence by the makeup crew and the prosthetics gang and everyone. They say, look at this. We can do this now. I don't know if they could have pulled off a convincing look featuring Ahsoka sans headdress, maybe even just a few years ago.
Yeah, I had the pic last night. I was looking for it right now. But yeah, you can see, where they've blended it in. There's I actually was thinking about that. And it's like, I've seen all kinds of various animals at zoos and things like that, where you've got fur blending into horn or other textures. And so it absolutely makes a lot of sense. I have not ever been one to judge a character by their Leku or their tentacles or anything like that, because I tell you what, Hera may have tentacles, Ula had tentacles, and I got no problem with either one of them. I'll tell you what. And no problem with Ahsoka's Leku either.
It's a little more complex, though, than the Twi'lek, because there are, of course, 3 head tails.
That's true.
And they vary in size and width as they expand down the back. So I think there's a lot more meat in those tails, let's just say. She got meaty tails.
Right. Meaty tails. Okay. Here's another story. We got Peter Ramsey, who directed episode 4 of Ahsoka was interviewed recently by the folks over at IGN, and he teased a villain twist in the story. He said he's talking about the great Ray Stevenson and what he was like, there on the set. And he said that remembering how Ray Stevenson approached the character of Baylan, quote, the idea that he was evil or a bad guy was never part of the discussion. And I think that's really key here. He doesn't see himself as evil. And I think this goes, Jim, beyond the sort of the cliche of, well, and it's valid, but that a great villain sees himself as the hero in his own story.
Always.
I think this is a step beyond that. It's not that trope. This is that Baylan truly does not see himself as a villain, as a bad guy, as evil. That's not part of it. Moving on, the quote, he says, it was just like, no, he has an agenda and he has a belief system, and that's very rigorous and very sincere about it. And it's just a different one than the other characters have. So in a way that Ray played him, he was playing a person who was at peace with his own decisions and had a real goal and a real philosophy, and he wasn't going to betray it. It wasn't, at last I can destroy the Jedi or anything like that. It was Baylan. It's how Baylan says in the episode, I see things differently than you do. I disagree with your way. And he actually believes that he's serving the greater good. Now, even Peter Ramsey admits what that plan ultimately is. I don't know. Filoni is very secretive with even his fellow creatives.
Yeah.
So here you got the director of episode 4, part 4, which has a lot of meaty Baylan Skoll stuff. It's the whole temptation of Sabine. So here you are, you're the director on the set. You got to coach the actor through this, and your executive producer and writer is not going to tell you what is really happening. So he says Filoni's very secretive even with his fellow creatives, and not even Peter Ramsey in this case knows where Ahsoka will go. He says there's going to be surprises for me down the line.
Right. Listen, you know Filoni.
Oh,
and not only did he not reveal the information to Peter Ramsey, he also made Peter Ramsey feel dumb for asking, because that's what Filoni does. He lords this stuff over you.
And wouldn't you like to know?
Yeah,
you'd really like to know that, wouldn't
you could only see what I'm looking at right now. I mean, really, these are comments that Mr. Filoni has directed at myself and Jason Swank over the years. The only way I combat that with Dave is I just say, I don't want to know. No spoilers, dude. I don't want to know.
I can hear Filoni saying to a guy like Peter Ramsey, yeah, I bet when you heard you were going to direct this that you'd figure it all out. You'd know it all. We would tell you everything. But guess what? We're not. We don't.
Anyone who knows Dave Filoni and how he operates would agree with us 1,000%. We've all seen it.
But definitely Baylan Skoll is one character where you can keep peeling the onion away. It's a very layered, great performance by Ray Stevenson, the late great Ray Stevenson.
He's like really a Bond villain, kind of.
Oh man, but so multidimensional, and you just want to know more about him. You want to know what makes him tick. You want to know what that greater good is, because it doesn't seem that it has really anything to do with Thrawn, other than the fact that Thrawn is going to somehow usher it in. But Thrawn does not seem to be the greater good as far as Baylan Skoll is concerned, at least the way I'm reading the lines and the way that Ray Stevenson is giving them there.
The Baylan's got it all figured out.
Right.
He's just being patient and waiting for his time to make his move. And so I'm sure we'll be seeing that all unfold in the last 3 episodes of Ahsoka.
Yeah, I said earlier, it's a good thing that some of these outlets, especially outlets like Entertainment Weekly, have really got a lot of stuff in the can with a lot of these actors for Ahsoka. Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who is she's a major Star Wars. I don't know, you'd call her Star Wars royalty, but she's getting awfully close to it, given the fact that she's married to Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, and of course she's playing Hera in the Ahsoka series. There's some new quotes that are just being released from Mary about playing Hera?
Yeah, a lot of it is about, how she got the job, how long it takes to put on the makeup, what it's like to work with the Jason Sindula actor and see Star Wars through his perspective and how that helps her play the maternal role on the show and all of that, yada, yada, yada. I'm always looking for hints about what we're going to see in future episodes. And she makes this comment. And I want you to listen to it. She could be talking about Ahsoka Part 5, the episode we just saw, as far as its impact on the story was so huge. But listen closely to what she says here about what could be another impactful moment in the series that could be coming up in the next 3 episodes. I don't think she's talking about the World Between Worlds experience that Ahsoka went on. Listen very closely to what she says as she hints about an impactful moment in the series that we may or may not have seen yet.
There's one that I don't want to give away, but it was like carrying kind of all the seasons of Rebels into it and kind of the emotional history of that, as well as everything that happened between the end of Rebels and the beginning of our show, and getting to kind of bring all of that to fruition in a very kind of satisfying way. And that was really amazing to get to do.
Mm-hmm. So she's not talking about events in the Clone Wars. She's talking specifically about events in Rebels that will see some of those loose threads get tied up, specifically the Ezra Bridger stuff and the status of Grand Admiral Thrawn. That stuff all has its foundations in Rebels, not Clone Wars. Clone Wars is what we got flashbacks to in this past episode and the resolution of the demons that Ahsoka was fighting regarding her relationship with Anakin and warfare and the Jedi and everything. But this, she's talking about Rebels, and she also says, very importantly, we find out what happens between the end of Rebels and the beginning of Ahsoka. So blanks are going to be filled in, I firmly believe. She's talking about resolution of story threads we haven't seen yet. She's not talking about Part 5. She's talking about a future episode where the Rebels story arcs will find their conclusion or find a new start. Good stuff.
Yeah, I think that I've thought from the beginning that we're going to see. Obviously, we're going to see Ezra. We've already seen him, at least in hollow form. We've seen Zeb, and there's no reason that they created that Zeb model and not use it in Ahsoka with the Rebels. The one missing link here is Kanan, and I actually think we're going to see a live action Kanan. I think it's going to be a flashback. When I was hearing the quote from Mary Elizabeth, I was thinking about perhaps something to do with that painting of them all together. Could it be some sort of flashback of them there in that formation somehow? Something along those lines.
Do you
it would be quite emotional.
We would see Freddie Prinze Jr. play the live action version of Kanan Jarrus?
It's a good question. I mean, they're inconsistent about this. For every Lars Mikkelsen, you got Rosario Dawson. So you can't really assume that there's going to be a crossover with the actor. Although you got a guy like Freddie Prinze who has a lot of screen time over the years.
He's got a marquee
he is
name.
An on-camera actor. He does have a marquee name. Got a famous wife.
Buffy.
Buffy. I don't know if would he work for you?
Yes, actually. I think he would.
Physically, he could pull it off.
He might be a little too old, actually.
I was thinking that too, yeah.
Because if Kanan Jarrus was just a child when Order 66 came down, that would put the character of Kanan Jarrus probably in his mid to late 20s at best by the time of his death. And Freddie, he's like, I don't know, 45, 55.
He's probably my age. Yeah, he's probably my age.
I don't know how old Freddie is. But I was a fan of his dad's and Chico and the Man. I used to like that show.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
Chico and the Man. Most people probably don't remember that one, but some people do. Yeah. How old is Freddie after all? I'd like to know. He was born in
and it isn't the
1976. Swank.
Okay, so he's 1 year older than me. So he's 47.
Mm-hmm. Kind of long in the tooth to be jumping into the role of King Jairus. But I mean, if you put that face mask on him where you only see half his face, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, wasn't Ewan and Ewan's daughter in an episode of
Kenobi? Yeah.
Kenobi, yeah. So you had all three of them now being in the Star Wars universe. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is. That's unprecedented as far as I know, unless you want to count George Lucas and his daughters appearing in Revenge of the Sith. I mean, but George
the Papanoidas.
George runs the show, though. I mean, it's not like
Yeah. Hey, there's news. There's Lando news for folks out there. This is pretty big. This is a pretty big deal. There is a change, I guess, in what to expect from the Lando series. Now, we know that it was originally, what was that original writer, showrunner that ended up kind of finding out on social media that he was no longer running the show?
Justin Simeon.
Justin Simeon, that's right. Yeah, the guy who wrote the new Haunted Mansion movie.
Yes.
Justin Simeon.
Yes.
Yeah. And so he finds out on social media not that long ago, I think that was back in July, that Donald Glover and his brother Steven were going to be running the Lando series. He's like, wow, that's news to me. I thought I was doing it. Well, good luck to them. But lo and behold, it turns out, Jim, that it's not going to be a TV series for Disney Plus. It's looking like it's going to be a feature film. This really blew me away. This shocked me when I saw this on the rundown. Prepared. I don't even know where this quote is from. Where was Stephen Glover out talking about this and breaking this news?
Oh, well, I actually have the quote. We actually hear Stephen's voice, and he's gonna lay it all out on us. It's he appeared on a podcast, and the podcast is called Pablo Torre Finds Out. And I
sure did
about Pablo or anything, but he discusses with Stephen. They bring up it's heavily edited, this interview. Pablo has what we call in the industry a very heavy usage of the blade, because he chops this stuff up, man. But presumably he asks Stephen Glover about the status of the Lando series, and then Stephen reveals that it's not going to be a series at all. So let's hear the clip.
No, yeah, I mean, I could pretty much be like, yeah, you know, we're doing it's not even a show.
Should we bleep it?
I'm sure like the nerds will figure it out anyway.
Great.
They'll read my lips or something.
But wait, you said it's not even a show?
No, the idea right now is to do a movie, you know, but like that's the thing. Like right now, because of the strike, it's kind of like telephone. All the information like
wait, so I can
out.
be an information broker
Yes.
between you and the Walt Disney Company? Guys, they're doing a movie.
You gotta pretend like you just got a text. I'm hearing. My sources are telling me.
So it's pretty loosey-goosey and everything, but he does reveal that, and upon hearing this, journalists at Variety reached out to Lucasfilm and said, hey, what's up? Donald Glover's brother is on podcast saying that there's going to be a Lando movie, not a series anymore. And Lucasfilm confirmed that information, that yes, the Lando series is now going to be a film. The pivot has begun. And what an odd pivot to consider, because the film that really put Star Wars cinematically on ice was the Solo, a Star Wars story film. And this film is essentially a spin-off of that. So I'm really surprised that they want to drop this sucker out in the cinemas. If they do, I hope they come up with a better name for it than Lando. This idiocy, this this infantile way of titling these shows by the name of the character alone is just insulting to me as a film goer. Give me a proper movie title. Don't just call it Lando, because then I think I'm just going to be seeing Lando the whole time. This is a great opportunity to use Lando as a vehicle to really dig into the Star Wars underworld, which is a concept that's been getting developed at Lucasfilm since 2010. Even before that, Star Wars Underworld was supposed to be a live-action TV show. Take elements of that. Take elements of the Star Wars 1313 game. Give us a real taste of the seedy side of the Star Wars galaxy. Give us the bounty hunters. Give us the Hutts. Give us it all in a nice, tight package. And call it something like, I don't know, Godfather of the Galaxy. Give it a better title than Lando. It's just, it doesn't sell me on anything except I know who the protagonist is. Let's get some creativity behind some of these titles here. And this is the Marvelization of Hollywood in effect, when you start calling all the films just the names of the characters. Yeah. Iron Man, Hulk, Lando. I don't know, man. It's not working for me. It's not working.
Yeah, the other thing that's not working for me is just this idea of it's the reverse. It's like Iger goes, all right, everything that we were going to put on the big screen, we're going to put on the small screen, and we're going to do it on the streaming series. All right, go. And the big machine, chung, 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 starts going like in that direction. Yeah, like an ad. And now he goes, all right, everything that we were going to make for the small screen, we'll make it for the big screen. Chug, chug, chug. So the machine's got to go back the other way. I don't like this. First of all, I love Lando. Don't get me wrong. He's great. But I don't see this being a big blockbuster. I see this movie being DOA, dead on arrival before it even starts. Would it have worked as a series, a miniseries on Disney Plus? Yes. I think the Disney Plus model, that platform is perfect for things like this. A feature, no. Save the feature for the big important stuff. Not a Lando series.
Is Donald Glover
not a
even
Jabba series?
Is he considered main man material for a feature film? Donald Glover? I thought he was largely television, or parts of an ensemble.
Well, Lando is a pretty iconic character. I suppose they're saying, well, Donald Glover may not be, but Lando is, Can he carry a big...
Can Lando carry a film?
Right.
He's
like this Blue Beetle movie that DC just put out, right?
Regardless
of Blue Beetle movie that DC just put out. It's got the kid from the Cobra Kai series. Of course, that's a big hit streamer, but at the end of the day, it was like he couldn't carry a big blockbuster film, and he didn't. And the movie didn't perform the way they wanted to, despite all the hype of this being the reboot of the DCU. So you're absolutely right bringing up, can Donald Glover carry a big blockbuster film? I don't know.
I don't think
maybe not.
He doesn't have that notch on his belt right now.
No.
And I know there's a lot of big Childish Gambino fans who are yelling at their speaker telling me to go to you-know-where, but let's face it. I mean, what is the track record here for Donald Glover being a leading man? I don't think there is a track record. And as far as the whole flip-flop from theatrical to streaming here, I have to quote our buddy Kyle Newman, who was on fire today in the old Jedi Council threads. But he looks back at the whole streaming craze that Iger ignited with Disney Plus, and then the rest of the industry all followed in his wake. Kyle says, streaming was like roller skating. It was cool for a few years when people were dumb enough to listen to disco, but times change. And I thought that was kind of a brilliant statement as someone who's lived through both streaming and disco roller skating. So we'll have Kyle on after the Ahsoka series wraps up, and we'll pick his brain and get all his crazy thoughts and hear all the mayhem in his household in the background while we talk. There's always like 20 people going through Kyle's house, and everyone's doing dishes. And the dogs are always barking. The children are always screaming. And Kyle's just there as the universe spins around him. And that's why we love him.
We love it.
Hey, this is Dave Filoni, and you are listening to Rebel Force Radio with Jason and Jimmy.
Couple more stories we got to get to because this is about the future, as we're talking about the future of Star Wars filmmaking. So Shawn Levy was supposedly working on a Star Wars film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Shawn Levy is working on a Star Wars film. And if I remember right, I'm starting to lose track of these things, so you have to forgive me. But easy. Shawn Levy's film was not defined. We've got Filoni doing the Filoni-verse. We've got the Indiana Jones director doing Mangold. He's doing the Star Wars BC, or BF, Before the Force, the First Jedi. And then who do we have with the Rey film? That's
Charmin Obaid-Chinoy.
Yes, Charmin Obaid-Chinoy. So, and now we got this Shawn Levy project, which we've heard, which we don't really know what the hell that movie is.
Now, this is, can I just say, let's just cut to the chase.
Yeah.
This is another deal where Kathy Kennedy and the Lucasfilm execs are barking up the tree of the flavor of the month. And Shawn Levy is that. He's the Stranger Things guy. I mean, he's among the Stranger Things guys, and he has all kind of different projects underway and fan bases, and he's working on the Deadpool film. It's just, he's another one of the flavor of the week. So they approach these people and they say, hey, do you like Star Wars? Oh, I love Star Wars. Well, have you ever considered working on Star Wars? Well, no, not really, but I never thought I'd get the opportunity. Well, guess what? You have the opportunity. She's like, Oprah giving out cars.
Right,
And
you get a Star Wars. I also think that sometimes the conversation goes like, well, have you ever thought about working on Star Wars?
Yeah.
Well, no, but I always had this idea about what if Dagobah, and they go, I like it, kid. I like the cut of your jib.
And then 2 weeks later at the convention, Kathy's standing on stage making the announcement. And Bob Iger has already applied a release date. And it's like, well, this guy that we're kind of impressed with his work on a Netflix show says he has something of an idea, but...
Perfect. December 22nd, 2028.
No,
he's like Karnak.
That's Iger's more anxious than that. He'd say 25. Get to work.
But he's already stacked the decks. Already,
and it's too late. He's already told the stockholders, "There's nothing you can do about it now. You can't ask for more time. You can't talk to Bob about the realities of creating something that is a part of such a vast and magical mythology. You can't just fart this stuff out, Disney." It's like the more things change, the more they stay the same. And so that's this Shawn Levy guy. He's flavor of the week, just like they brought Rian Johnson on board. He was a flavor of the week. They brought on Taika Waititi, another flavor of the week. At least they worked with Taika on Mandalorian, but he's out talking about stuff too now.
Oh, we've got a clip of him in just a minute talking about the future of his movie. But let's talk about this week's flavor of the week and Shawn Levy and this quote. He's actually being he's out promoting something. I guess they caught him on a press line.
Yeah, he's out at the Toronto International Film Fest, and he has a Netflix series called All the Light We Cannot See. And so he sat down with Collider and they asked him, what's up with this Star Wars project you're involved in?
We were just starting the process of developing my movie and a writer's strike happened. So we are in that holding pattern that so much of our industry is in.
There you go. It's not much of an update. I mean, you probably knew that before we even played the recording, but but it is good to hear that at least there was a starting line placed in front of him. So this is something that's legitimately happening, unlike the Rian Johnson trilogy, unlike Benioff and Weiss, unlike well, Patty Jenkins, she was deep in development on Rogue Squadron, and they pulled the plug on that.
But that was another great example. So you had Patty Jenkins, who was coming off of Wonder Woman, the first one, and then no sooner did she do that little sizzle reel with her getting into an X-Wing, Wonder Woman 1984 came out and nobody liked it, and she was out. Yeah, she was out. You brought up Taika Waititi. So at this Toronto International Film Festival, they're honoring Shawn Levy, and Taika is giving him this honor, and he actually brings up his own Star Wars film in this in his tribute to Shawn Levy.
Shawn has resisted the comfort of sameness in his career, resulting in work that is audacious in its range of genres, but always retains his signature humanity and heart. From Cheaper by the Dozen to Date Night to Real Steel to Arrival to The Adam Project, and now the bold filmmaking shift of his newest work, All the Light We Cannot See. He's currently making his own Deadpool movie with his Canadian soulmate, Ryan What's-His-Face, and co-starring one of those other annoying Australians, the guy from The Australian.
Hugh Jackman.
After he's had his way with that franchise, like a cruel, indiscriminate virus, he'll move on to another, and another, and another, and then eventually probably Star Wars. And unlike me, let's hope he manages to finish a script for that.
Is this him waving the white flag, Jim? Is this him waving? Yeah, that's not happening. I'm not finishing. I haven't finished the script. Although no one's finishing any scripts these days, so he's probably like, "Oh, thank God for this strike. Now I'm not really late on my Star Wars script."
Oh, that's true. That is true. But I think maybe he's kind of hit a sort of a creative block, a writer's block or something. He just hasn't been inspired with the thing that will give him what he needs to complete his Star Wars film. I believe in past comments he said that he was really having a hard time developing a third act. It doesn't sound like anything he's going to give up, and I don't think necessarily Star Wars is going to give up on him, because they don't have all their eggs in the Taika Waititi basket like they did with Abrams and Rian Johnson and Abrams again. They put all their eggs in that basket. With Taika, he can take forever because they got Filoni developing something. They have James Mangold. They have Shawn Levy. They have everything else. That's the
Obaid Chinoy,
the
Ray film. Yeah,
everything else, plus some television projects and stuff. So they got a lot in the pipeline right now. So I think the desperation for a Taika Waititi take on Star Wars doesn't really exist in the offices at San Francisco. But it doesn't mean that it's DOA. I will say that. I don't think there's much of a heartbeat to it right now. But that doesn't mean that they can use some creative defib paddles on the body and spring it back to life. I think Taika Waititi is a pretty interesting creative talent, and he's done a lot of interesting things. I still am not convinced that Star Wars is like the right fit for him, but what do I know? I mean, his episodes of Mandalorian seem pretty decent, and just to get a unique take on Star Wars from him, he provides unique takes on almost anything he does, so it could be the thing to jumpstart the whole franchise and provide it with a solid path into the future, or it could be something that might be way outside the box and repulsive to the fan base. Who knows? Taika presents that. But I like a lot of the work he's done. I just think as a personality, he might be, borderline flaky. And so, I mean, how much confidence are you going to have in borderline flaky at the end of the day when it comes to Star Wars?
Yeah, that's my thought as well. There's something that George was always pretty adamant about, was he understood and always talked about how hard work making Star Wars is. It's not easy. It takes a lot of commitment in terms of time. J.J. Abrams understood how much that making a Star Wars film, it consumes you. It takes years of your life, years away from your family, or upturns their lives. So it's a big commitment. And I see somebody like a Taika Waititi, who's a funny guy, obviously very talented, but does he have as Anakin said this week, the conviction to tell his Star Wars story? I don't know. We'll find out.
Well, I think it's best to let him take his time if he is to continue developing Star Wars. And I feel that way with any creative who works on the show. That they, these deadlines that Iger signs the paper and it's just like, see you in 2 years at the premiere. It's like, wait, what? We haven't there's no casting. We haven't even scouted locations yet, Bob. 2 years. See you there.
Well, I gotta say, obviously we're gonna get Skeleton Crew. Obviously, we are going to get. Well, I think it ends there as far as the obvious.
Well, Acolyte,
because after Skeleton
of
Crew,
that
Acolyte,
and we've already seen footage of it.
Acolyte,
but you don't know.
Acolyte's sort of this own thing. Like it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna impact the Filoni verse. I think it's gonna tell its own story. But we get Skeleton Crew, and then I think it's full steam ahead on the Filoni movie.
Yeah, well, unless there's a second season of Ahsoka, unless there's a fourth season.
I don't think they have time.
What?
I don't think they have time.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows? With the Lando series becoming a film, I mean, we could see the dominoes fall on all Star Wars projects. It's a film now.
Yeah.
Acolyte, it's a film now.
Right.
Mandalorian, it's a film
3
now.
films.
Radio, baby! Get full access to RFR only on Patreon. Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.
You may fire when ready.
Patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.
Hey, Jason, you remember last summer when I visited San Francisco for the Rancho Obi-Wan fundraiser, and I met a great guy out there named Shawn House, and he gave me a tour of the original Industrial Light and Magic facility, the original Bay Area ILM, where all those wizards worked on all those great movies from Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Indiana Jones. I mean, just so many movies. You know the history of ILM is rich, and they had their fingerprints on so many of the classic films leading up to even today. You know, it's not all about Star Wars at ILM. So you remember I went out there and I met Shawn, and he gave me a tour of the former facility, and I was so blown away and impressed by it. It's now called 3210 Studios, and that's where Shawn is at and where he's working. And I was just blown away by it because it seemed like it was a ILM time capsule or a time machine going back into the past. It was like I was in the same places that I saw in all the documentaries, and they appear to be like rather untouched since that time. All the integrity of all the masters that passed through those doors, guys like Ken Ralston and Lorne Peterson and Phil Tippett and Dennis Murin and Joe Johnston. And of course, George Lucas himself worked there. Being on the stage with the green screen, the same stage where they shot things like the speeder bike chase from Return of the Jedi, or going up on the roof where they blew up Jabba's sail barge. You can see the whole video of the tour that I went on last year. It's up on our YouTube channel. There's just this beautiful theater there that's, up to George Lucas's standards. That's a THX theater. In the basement is the pit, where guys like Spaz invented the digital dinosaurs from Jurassic Park. This place is a landmark as far as Hollywood history and filmmaking history goes. And it's just incredible. And we got bad news about it. I'm going to bring on Shawn from 3210 Studios, and he could give us the lowdown about what the future has in store for the former ILM studio, now 3210 Studios in San Rafael. So is Shawn around? Hey, Shawn, there he is.
Yeah, there he is.
Hey, gentlemen, how you doing?
Hey, Shawn. So you heard the intro. Fill us in on what's going on with 3210 Studios.
Well, unfortunately, the economy and the strikes have hit us really hard. And the two principals of 3210, Tim Partridge and Greg Beaumont, I was trying to buy the facility. And I should say I was trying to buy 3210 Studios, the business. And I submitted a lease proposal to the landlord, and the landlord wrote back saying that they were doing an internal analysis of the facility, and just asked for my patience. And I went, okay, that's not a no. And then a couple of weeks later, when I pressed on it, not because of a lack of patience, but because Tim was ready to pull the plug himself, the landlord wrote back and said, we have gotten far enough along in our analysis that we have determined that we're going to repurpose the buildings. We thank you for your support through the years, and good luck.
Oh, that's just
and yeah. And I met with the landlord again last Friday, and I tried to find out if there was any room for maneuvering to stay on there, and basically I was told no. So as of this point in time, we have until October 31st to get everything out of there. The tenants, the 17 tenants that are in there, the model shop, the fabrication shop, all the stuff out of the stage. And if it goes forward, I'm going to have to auction off all, 45 years of movie making tools and history.
Wow. Describe what some of those tools and historical pieces are. What do you have in there?
We have the original vacuform machine that Lauren Peterson and the 8 original model makers down in Van Nuys. Lauren told me that when he bought the vacuform machine, it was older than the dirt on the hills back then, and that was in 1975. And this thing to this day is still a powerhouse. We use it all the time for creating models and everything, but this is the one that the original X-Wings and TIE fighters were vacuformed on. We have tools that Lauren made over the years. We have, it's just, from purpose-built band saws to purpose-built sleds for the table saws to, wind machines and smoke machines, and the list goes on.
I spotted some memorabilia in there too.
Yeah, there's some of that as well.
I mean, really great museum quality pieces. And I think that the studio should be turned into a museum, or at least be honored as a historical landmark, because this is the place where AT-AT walkers learned to walk. This is the place where Tauntauns learned to run. This is the place where so much movie history, like I said, not just Star Wars. Jason's showing a video here. I believe that's a blaster rifle from Star Trek.
That's correct.
Is there anything we can do to help and save the original home of ILM?
Well, thank you for asking that, Jimmy. Right now, because this news is so fresh and it upended everything, I am working on 2 courses of action. One of them is on vacating the facility, and then the second one is trying to save it. I realize it sounds like planning for war and defeat at the same time, but that's the situation that we're in. We are going to be setting up a GoFundMe page. I'm bound and determined to try to continue on the legacy that so many before me have created and that I've been part of for all these years. So we don't have the GoFundMe page up yet. I will let you know as soon as we do. But the idea is to make an offer to the landlord that she can't refuse.
Refuse. Shawn, do you have? You don't have to give it here, obviously, but has she given you a number? Is there a number that's floating around to where you will set the GoFundMe at a certain amount so that potential contributors, investors, whomever, know if they're winning? I mean, or is this just kind of firing blind?
No, there are several numbers in different stages. The first one is, I should back up. The landlord, we asked her if she's willing to sell the property and how much. And she stated the same as she has for several years now, which is she cannot sell the property yet. And apparently there's some sort of trust because it was her dad that bought the property from Marsha Lucas in 1988. And they own a lot of commercial property as well as
That's a
residential
name
property.
we haven't heard in a long time.
Yes, exactly. And so but my understanding is it's in some sort of trust, and her folks, her mom is still alive, and so for some reason or another, I don't understand what the situation exactly is, but she's not able to offload the property, and because it is such a purpose-built facility. That's why she's been trying to rent it to film companies through the years. But it's also, as commercial real estate goes up, it's been more and more difficult to fill it with filmmakers because the people below the line, which is what we are as technicians and craftspeople, haven't been able to keep up our wages with the times of real estate and whatnot. And so therefore, the bids on these things it's hard to maintain a large property. And so she has been renting it to us at below market or below what the market looks like. But when I say that, we're talking about a purpose-built building that has no other function.
Right.
And if she was to gut it, which is what the plans are from my understanding, then she could turn it into quote unquote usable and viable rental space, such as offices and warehouse space.
Right.
So the only thing I have to go on as far as the value of the property is what the county assessor assesses the facility at. And that number has jumped $4 million in 2 years to $4.3 million in 2 years to $12.8 million is the assessed value on the property.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Shawn, are there resources in terms of film preservation or historical, buildings or items of historical importance, grants, things like that? I mean, I'm sure you've looked into these things, but if in case some of our listeners are wondering the same questions I am, are there resources out there that could help protect some of these things?
Yes, but it's a complicated thing to go about. For the most part, throughout the United States, it requires the request of the property owner themselves to be declared historical. And I said for the most part. And that what happens is when they get this historic designation, it ties the property owner's hands as far as the use of the facility and any modifications to it.
This is true, yes.
It is without a doubt a historical facility. It's not 50 years old. And I wouldn't say that there's anything architecturally around the exterior or anything like that that would normally qualify it. But one of the important things is cultural impact of cultural significance. And if Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Harry Potter are not historical impacts on culture, I don't know what is.
Right.
The thing is, it's the landlord's property, and she has a right to do with it what she wishes. It's my fervent hope that through the support of fans and filmmakers and everything like that, maybe there can be some movement to make the landlord realize that. But then again, she has a whole board of people that she has to answer to as well.
Right.
And she has been very kind over the past 12 years to us. It's not like, oh, bad landlord, raising rent.
Right. Of course. Yeah. There are no villains here. There are no villains here.
Not at all.
But as you mentioned, those big franchises, Harry Potter, Star Trek, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, I can't help but think that if all those fandoms were to coalesce around this cause, and if there was something in it for them, an opportunity to visit it or to see it in a condition to where they can feel a sense of, I hate to want to use the word ownership, but investment or buy-in. Is that something you're thinking about with this GoFundMe? Access. That's a good word.
Absolutely. As I think I told you before, Jimmy, that we had originally, just before COVID, not knowing it was coming, of course, had planned to start tours of the facility on the weekends, and so that it would be like a living museum. And that for the first time, we could have fans that would walk through and see exactly what you saw. The sound stages where Mark and Carrie were on the speeder bike, and the dish from Men in Black, the Men in Black saucer crashes. For where Transformers tore through the building, where Back to the Future, where Doc and Marty stood as the flames raced in between their legs from the DeLorean as it hit 88 miles an hour. I mean, there is definite things that we can do. It's just a matter of the fact that we don't have a lot of time to accomplish this.
Yeah. Not to mention, the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, which is one of the biggest breakthroughs in special effects history. At this place, the history is so rich in it, so much so that fans over the years may have heard it being referred to as Kerner Optical, because that was the company that was in the warehouse before ILM moved in. And they left the door out in front saying Kerner Optical just to woo off any people poking around where they shouldn't be. And that door itself is a piece of history that hangs in the hallways of Lucasfilm offices at the Presidio. So obviously Lucasfilm recognizes the historical importance of a place like this. I can't help but think that maybe some corporate support would help out via Lucasfilm or Disney or George Lucas himself. But again, you have all of those diverse fan bases that could be rallied to save the original home of ILM and make it accessible to fans to go on a tour. I loved my tour there. I was going upstairs. You're like, did you know there's a fully walkable grid up on the ceiling? I'm like, no, let's go look. And we're up there, and we go up this long stairwell, and all of a sudden this dude, Marty, pops out of just the wall, and he starts talking about what it was like working with George Lucas and everything. I was like, wow, this is a time capsule, and it really needs to be preserved. And I wish you guys the best of luck, and I really hope that a miracle can happen that will save 3210 Studios, thus saving the legacy of every film that was produced within those walls.
Thank you so much for that, Jimmy. Yeah, and it's not hyperbole to say that this facility has had the most effect on film, television, multimedia, and gaming in the last 45, 50 years. There's been no other facility that has contributed as much in the way of advancement and creativity. And it's not the facility that contributed, it's the people that work there.
Right.
And that's the most important part of the legacy. It's the tribal knowledge that still exists to this day. And to have their work and the memory of their work be put to a bulldozer, to me, that's a tragedy.
Oh, it breaks my heart.
That's what I'm trying to prevent.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
It breaks my heart.
So, well, again, we wish the best of luck. As long as we have you, can I ask you about a news story that recently broke about a long-lost X-Wing model?
Oh, yes. Wow.
I think Jason has the story. I don't have it in front of me right now, but
I've got a photo of it right here. This is the this is the item in question here.
Red one.
Red
leader.
Yes. And this was discovered in a box in Greg Jean's garage. Greg Jean was a longtime special effects artist. He worked on Close Encounters and 1941, Star Trek, among many other things. And Greg had the biggest heart. He gave so many people their breaks into the industry. People like Bill George, And by the way, Bill was around when they unearthed this X-Wing.
Oh, wow.
Greg unfortunately passed away last year, and friends helped his family. Well, how shall I put this delicately? Greg was an avid collector. And he had two houses, one of which was completely packed with boxes and bags and of movie memorabilia from just everything. And a story was related to me recently, without naming names, that somebody was there helping go through this one house, and they saw a piece of metal on the floor, and they're like, "What is that?" Person picked it up and went, "Oh my goodness, this is one of the costume belt buckles from the Forbidden Planet."
Just sitting there.
I mean, just sitting on the floor. And this particular X-Wing is the Moby Dick of X-Wings, as it were. There's been a bunch of stories about the fact that in 1977 or late 1976 or 1977, ILM in Van Nuys, the original shop, was broken into, and an X-Wing and a Y-Wing fighter were stolen. And I can tell you that Greg Jean didn't do that, by the way. And what happened was that it was this almost mythical beast that nobody knew where the heck it was. And apparently Greg Jean bought it some years ago, not necessarily knowing the history of it, just knowing that this was an X-Wing from the original movie. And you got to figure that this was stolen before the movie ever came out. So it wasn't like somebody knew the impact that the movie would have made, let alone the iconic images of the X-Wing as their S-foil split open approaching the Death Star. I mean, nobody could have possibly imagined at that point in time. And yet when they discovered this, it had been in this box for over 45 years. And it was in what is relatively termed pristine condition. There were parts broken off of it and everything like that, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. And if you compare it to, say, the two X-Wings that still exist up at the archives, this thing is the most beautiful example of the model making and craftsmanship that existed on that film.
Wow.
The ones up at the ranch, the paint is, the color's gone gray. Red 5, Luke Skywalker's X-Wing, is missing its fuselage. Nobody knows where it is, so it's just the wings and gears. And this one's fully geared, it has lights and everything in it. And it's just an amazing example. And to have found it is just awesome. And it's going to go for insane amounts of money at auction when it
Yeah, I'm seeing that they're expecting $400,000 and higher.
No, that's the opening.
Oh, that's the opening bid. Oh, jeez.
It'll go for $1 million.
They're starting there.
Yeah.
Wow.
The talk amongst the collection community right now is that it's going to go for $2 to $3 million.
Wow.
And how did Greg end up in possession of the thing? I mean, he worked on Close Encounters. You said that there was a break-in. Do we know that there's a connection between the break-in and this X-Wing model?
Well, we know there is, because the break-in involved the stealing of the model, and it was so that even the FBI was involved in the investigation. And the thing is there were a lot of people that were working at Industrial Light and Magic, which was a brand new company at the time. It was fledgling. There were all these people that were, industrial designers and cabinet makers and people who had never been part of the film industry. And some of them worked out and some of them didn't. And so at the same time, Close Encounters was filming. There was Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers was coming along. So people were bouncing in between the different shops. So it's a possibility that, and I say it's a possibility because nobody knows. Greg has passed, unfortunately, but we know that he was an ultra honest guy. So he had no idea of what the lineage and what transpired involving this X-Wing when he got it. And he had just so much stuff that it's also a distinct possibility that he forgot about it. I mean, it's, if you take a look at the auction, I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg of,
I think all collectors can relate to forgetting what we have in our collections.
Oh,
you know,
this is true. No question.
I don't know, though. I'd be hard pressed to forget an X-Wing.
Well, right, but it's all relative, right, Shawn? I mean, you know, it's for me, it's a mail-in Kellogg's Luke or Han Solo and Stormtrooper disguise action figure for your friend. It's the best preserved X-Wing original model in existence. Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And 3210 is the best preserved tribute to the history of all the great artists who've passed through those doors. When I see the Kerner optical door on display on the wall at Lucasfilm, I always make a point of grabbing the door handle just to get a little bit of the mojo from all the talent that touched that door handle over the years. And your place, 3210, formerly ILM San Rafael, it has all of those vibes around each and every corner. So I certainly hope something can be done. And hey, tell us, what was the last Star Wars project that was worked on within those walls?
Rise of Skywalker.
That's right. That's right. I recall you mentioning that last time you were on the show. And
we blew up the planet Kijimi.
Yes, somebody had to do it. Damn it, you were the guys. You were the guys to blow that sucker up, and it was such an impressive.
There's actually
special
online
effect.
a whole behind the scenes of the explosion of Kijimi, showing the model, showing us setting it up with the pyrotechnics, and then blowing it off. And that's online. That's on YouTube, and it's also a behind the scenes featurette, I believe, on the DVDs.
Wow. So from Empire Strikes Back all the way up to Rise of Skywalker and every significant special effects oriented film in between, that building has a very rich history. And my wish would be for it to be designated as a historical landmark, protected forever, and also still functional. So guys like you, Shawn, can go in there and keep on creating and doing the things within that building that was meant to be done. And also for listeners, I want to point out that you can check out the great documentary series on Disney Plus, Light and Magic, which tells the whole history of ILM, especially look at episode 3. That's when you see a lot of great shots of the former ILM facility, now known as 3210 Studios. And I can vouch that not much has changed between that vintage footage and what's going on there now today. That place is funky.
Yes, and if I could point out also on Light and Magic that the majority of the interviews for that show were shot on at the Kerner campus at 3210. And without going, hold on a second here, I have to think about this. What I can say is that as you were to look at Light and Magic on the IMDb, which is the Internet Movie Database, instead of just listing the episodes now, it lists the fact that what you saw was season 1.
Oh, so a season 2 could be on the horizon, maybe, or in the near future? We don't know. Nothing's been confirmed.
What else can we assume when we venture onto IMDb, Jim, and see that it's season 1? You know, it's like we didn't know that there was going to be episode 5 until it became episode 4. So
correct.
It's also confusing. But what's not confusing is the fact that I really hope that something happens. It's coming down to the wire already, and we're just talking about it for the first time. But you have to have faith in the Force, and maybe something spectacular will happen to preserve the history and preserve your workspace and help ensure the future for that place, because it's just so sad to think of all the history that's just going to go away. Like you said, at the hands of bulldozer drivers. I just that sickens me. Let's chain ourselves to the building so they can't do it. Let's see.
Perfect. I'll be first in line.
Shawn, please keep us updated as you can. I know it's a busy time for you, but we have a lot of very passionate Star Wars fans that listen to this program, and they're going to want to know, and they're especially going to want to know how they can contribute, how they can help in some way. So we want that link, and we want the details on how they can get involved.
As soon as I have that, I will make sure that you guys do as well.
Awesome.
Thank you, Shawn. And everyone check out 3210.com or check out 3210 on Facebook. And keep your finger on the pulse for this one, because we're going to try to pull out all the stops to see what we can do to save 3210.
And you can also go on, if you do a Google search and then do a Google video search, if you just do 3210 Studios, there's a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes documentaries and fun things there as well.
Yeah, and be sure to check out my video tour on the Rebel Force Radio YouTube page, which was great.
Absolutely.
I mean, what a great day that was. Holy smokes. So thanks again, Shawn. We will stay in touch. We will get the word out about any efforts to support and save 3210. So please keep in touch, keep us updated, because I'm sure our audience is going to want to know what's going on as it all goes down over the next few weeks.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Shawn. Good luck. Talk soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
What a good guy he is. And I hope there's something
doing the
that can be
Lord's
done.
work, the Force's work with that. You know, it is. I work in a facility that was that literally had the bulldozers and the wrecking balls sitting right outside these beautiful historic theaters. Jim, you've been in some of them. We've performed in one, and it came down to a matter of hours before those theaters were going to be demolished and turned into a parking lot.
Wow.
But it took the community gathered, raised funds, and now it's one of the largest performing arts centers in the world. So these miracles can happen. That's why I was very interested in, I think you were thinking the same thing about this being a historical landmark. And it does tie the hands to some degree, but you can still keep it as a functioning facility. There's just certain things you can't do to violate the historic nature of what it is that you're preserving.
Yeah, like gutting it and turning it into office buildings.
Right.
God, perish the thought. Perish the thought.
You know, it's really sad. I don't, we don't talk a lot about the strike, mainly because it's not something that I have a great knowledge of. So, but it's just, it's sad about the collateral damage that is happening to guys like Shawn.
I know.
And I know everyone's fighting for a good wage, and I don't find fault with that. But man, you look around and you go, oh, it's just, it's tough. It's tough. Not to say this wouldn't have happened without it, but this certainly sped things up in that direction.
It's more than being caught between a rock and a hard place. It's being caught between an asteroid belt and a Star Destroyer at this point. So we really got to keep our fingers crossed. And like I said, provide as many positive vibes through the Force to 3210 Studios. And hopefully I'll be able to hook up with Shawn maybe next month. I plan on going out there. So.
Yeah. And I know you'll be bidding on that X-Wing with the big heritage auctions going on.
Yeah,
starting at $400,000.
You have to, there's heritage is the key word there in those auctions, and my heritage has been slim up to this point, my friend. So, as far as cash flow goes, so I'm not inheriting anything.
I couldn't help but, as Shawn was describing the nearly immaculate condition that this thing is in, even compared to what is in Lucasfilm's hands, I just kept thinking of that. It belongs in a museum,
Well, I did think of it. I'm glad we both showed the restraint. Not to be like, Shawn's going through a tough time right now. We're like barking Indiana Jones quotes at him.
Wacky quotes.
A little too much.
Right.
That's a little too much.
But still, I mean, you can understand Indy's passion when it comes to these things, because they get to a point where they don't belong to one person, or it seems wrong for it to belong to one individual, because it belongs to all of us in some ways.
It belongs to history.
Yes.
That belongs in a museum.
So do you.
Chewie, get us out of here.
All right, that's going to wrap things up for us here this week on Rebel Force Radio. Don't forget to join us next week, starting on Wednesday night live, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Pacific, for the RFR AHSOKA After Show. We'll be looking at Part 6. Only 3 more episodes to go. Yeah. Well, hopefully, Part 6 will build on the momentum created by the end of Part 4 and then all the way through Part 5. And we're going to just ride the Purgill waves to a big explosive finale in a couple of weeks. If you need more Rebel Force Radio in your life, and why wouldn't you? You might want to check out Rebel Force Radio on Patreon. That's right, Rebel Force Radio has a Patreon, and with it comes all kinds of benefits when you support us right here at RFR. You get things like the weekly full show video. So you're listening to the audio podcast right now. How would you like to be looking at our faces and seeing the video drops and seeing the images that we post up as we're talking about things? You got to check that out. That's only available at the All Access tier by being a member of RFR on Patreon. Well, what's Max showing up? He's showing something right now. What is that? Is that
just a card back from one of those Boba Fett figures they re-released recently?
Oh yeah, look at that. That vintage Kenner goodness. That Boba. Nice. Look at it. Ripped off the package like he was meant to be, folks. Ripped off the card. So you won't be able to see that on... He just licked it. Just licked the card. You wouldn't be able to see that if you weren't an RFR All Access member. So I feel bad for those of you who are not. Also, exclusive podcasts that you can't get anywhere else, like the Babu Freaks, RFR Q&A, RFR RPG. All those available as exclusive to the various Patreon tiers. $1 gets you in the door and you're listening. It's a great community of Star Wars fans, and you hear many of them on our voicemails. You hear many of them as callers on the after shows. So if you want to hang out with people like that, you want to check out RFR on Patreon. Don't forget about the YouTube channel. It is the exclusive home of all of our after shows. We only stream on YouTube. So check us out, the RFR YouTube channel. Please like, please subscribe, and please comment on those videos. They really do. That really does help us out a lot. We are on the socials. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And the website for all things Rebel Force Radio, rebelforceradio.com. If you want to help us out, the best way to do it is to just do what you're doing right now. Keep listening to the show and suggesting us to your friends and family members that are also Star Wars fans. If they haven't heard of Rebel Force Radio, it's about time you make the introduction. We also love to have you subscribe to the podcast. Your favorite podcatcher obviously lets you subscribe to the show. If it also lets you leave a review, we love to have those reviews. We read them all. Every week we read them all, believe you me. So, just one simple rule on those reviews, please.
Make them good.
All right, we'll see you next week for more Rebel Force Radio, starting with the AHSOKA After Show on Wednesday, and then on Saturday morning we'll be dropping the latest RFR. So we'll see you next time. For Rebel Force Radio, I'm Jason.
I'm Jimmy Mack.
And remember,
the Force will be with you, always.
Never tell me the odds. Han Solo.